Commander Li Hyun felt his coffee cup slip from his fingers as the massive shadows appeared on the main display. The ceramic shattered against the metal floor of Earth's primary orbital defense station, but nobody noticed. Every eye on the bridge was locked on the 12 colossal ships materializing at the edge of their solar system. "How big are those things?" whispered Communications Officer Park Sujin, her voice barely audible over the humming of the station's systems. Captain Kim Nari's fingers danced across her tactical console, her face growing paler with each reading. "The largest one is 40 kilometers long, sir. That's bigger than our entire lunar base." Li Hyun had commanded this station for 8 years, watching for threats from the void between stars. Pirates, rogue asteroids, the occasional territorial dispute with Mars colonies. Nothing had prepared him for this moment. The alien vessels hung in space like sleeping giants, their dark hulls reflecting no light, yet somehow visible against the star field. "Sir, incoming transmission," announced Lieutenant Park Ji-hoon from the communications array. His usually steady hands trembled as he adjusted the receivers. "They're broadcasting on every frequency we monitor. Radio, quantum, even the old emergency channels our great-grandparents used." The static cleared and a voice filled the bridge. Not the mechanical drone Li Hyun expected from alien invaders, but something almost musical, speaking in perfect Korean, then English, then Mandarin, Hindi, Arabic, and dozens of other Earth languages simultaneously, as if the speaker understood every human tongue that had ever existed. "Children of Terra, hear us and remember. We are the Etherans, architects of your species. We have returned to reclaim what belongs to us." The temperature on the bridge seemed to drop 10 degrees. Ensign Cho Min-soo looked up from his environmental controls, confusion written across his young face. "Sir, that's impossible. No alien species could know our languages like that." But Li Hyun was beginning to understand something far more disturbing. His mind raced back to academy training, to questions that had always bothered military strategists. Why were humans so naturally gifted at warfare? Why did their reflexes surpass those of every other Earth species? Why could a human soldier adapt to new combat situations faster than any computer simulation predicted? The alien voice continued, each word hammering another crack in humanity's understanding of itself. 3,000 rotations of your world. Ergo, we designed you for a singular purpose. The galaxy burned with war, and we required warriors unlike any that had existed. We took the raw genetic material of your primitive ancestors and forged you into living weapons. Captain Kim Nari gripped her console so tightly her knuckles went white. That can't be true. Evolution, fossil records, our entire history, carefully constructed, the Ethran voice replied, as if hearing her thoughts. Your scientists found exactly what we wanted them to find. Your reflexes, your tactical intuition, your ability to function under extreme stress, your capacity for both individual combat and coordinated military action, all designed, all programmed into your genetic code. Li Hyun felt the blood drain from his face as memories flooded back. His first day at the academy, when instructors had marveled at his natural ability to process multiple battlefield variables simultaneously. His daughter's recent acceptance into the pilot program, where she'd broken every reaction time record. His grandfather's war stories about impossible victories against overwhelming odds. Lieutenant Park Ji-hoon's scanner beeped frantically. "Commander, I'm detecting massive energy signatures from all 12 vessels, whatever those ships are carrying. It's beyond anything in our databases." The main view screen shifted to show detailed scans of the alien fleet. Each dreadnought bristled with weapons that defied human understanding, cannons that seemed to bend space around them, hull sections that phased in and out of visible reality, smaller craft swarming around the capital ships like metallic insects, their movements too precise and coordinated for any organic pilot. "The war we created you for ended long ago," the Ethran transmission continued. "We withdrew to distant sectors, leaving you to develop as we programmed. But now a greater threat emerges from the galactic core. The Devourers wake from their ancient slumber, consuming entire star systems to fuel their expansion across the galaxy." A new image appeared on screen, transmitted directly from the alien fleet. Li Hyun watched in horror as mechanical swarms stripped a planet bare in minutes, converting mountains, oceans, and cities into raw materials that fed into massive processing ships. The world became a hollow shell before crumbling into asteroid debris. 17 civilizations have fallen to them in the past solar cycle, the voice explained. Billions of lives converted into fuel for their machine collective. We require our warriors to function as intended. You will serve or you will be eliminated as we eliminated the other species that chose disobedience. Ensign Cho Min-soo looked up from his station, his face pale but determined. Sir, long-range sensors are detecting massive energy buildups in deep space. Something big is moving toward the inner galaxy. The Ethran fleet began to move, 12 massive shapes gliding through space with impossible grace. Their approach triggered every alarm on the defense station, but Li Hyun knew their weapons were useless against such advanced technology. You have 48 hours to prepare your military forces for integration into our fleet, the alien voice announced. Resistance will result in the complete sterilization of your world, as we have done to 6 other species who forgot their purpose. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in absolute silence except for the steady beeping of instruments and the distant hum of life support systems. Li Hyun stared at the alien fleet, his mind struggling to process the implications. Everything humanity believed about itself, every achievement, every moment of pride in their species' accomplishments, had been a lie carefully constructed by beings who saw them as nothing more than biological weapons. But as he watched his crew working at their stations, as he saw the determination in their eyes despite the overwhelming odds, Li Hyun realized something the Etherans might not have anticipated. 3,000 years was a long time, long enough for weapons to forget they were weapons, long enough to become something more. The emergency session in the United Nations building lasted 17 straight hours. Li Hyun stood before representatives from every nation on Earth, his uniform wrinkled and his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. Behind him, massive screens displayed the Ethran fleet hanging like dark omens at the edge of their solar system. 43 hours remaining, announced President Kim Tae-hyung of South Korea, his voice cutting through the heated arguments that had filled the assembly hall. Whatever we decide now. Prime Minister Nakamura of Japan slammed his hand on the table. How do we even know this alien is telling the truth? Maybe they're lying about creating us. Maybe this is just some elaborate invasion tactic. General. Martinez from the American delegation shook her head grimly. Our scientists ran genetic analysis all night. The patterns are there, buried deep in our DNA. Artificial markers that shouldn't exist in natural evolution. The aliens aren't lying, Lee. Hyun watched the faces around the room, seeing fear, anger, and determination in equal measure. These were leaders who had spent decades arguing over trade routes and territorial disputes. Now they faced the revelation that their entire species was an artificial construct designed for war. The question isn't whether we're created beings, interrupted Dr. Singh from the Indian Research Council. The question is what we do about it. Do we become slaves to our makers, or do we choose our own path? The vote was unanimous. For the first time in human history, every nation on Earth agreed on something. They would resist. Within 6 hours, Li Hyun found himself in a bunker complex beneath Seoul that most governments didn't know existed. The corridors buzzed with activity as military personnel from dozens of countries set up communication arrays and tactical planning centers. General Cho Min-ho, a veteran of 3 different peacekeeping missions, coordinated the massive undertaking with calm efficiency. We're setting up resistance cells in every major city, Cho Min-ho explained, as they walked past rooms filled with screens showing global military positions. If the Etherans try to land occupation forces, they'll face guerrilla warfare on every continent. Intelligence Officer Han So-young looked up from her bank of computers, her fingers flying across multiple keyboards simultaneously. Sir, I'm picking up encrypted transmissions from deep space. Not from the Ethran fleet, but from somewhere else. Entirely. The signals were faint, hidden beneath layers of cosmic background radiation. It took Han So-young's team 3 hours to decode them, working with quantum computers that pushed the boundaries of human technology. What they found changed everything. There are others, she announced to the command staff, her voice filled with excitement and hope. Other species created by the Etherans, and they're trying to contact us. The first transmission came through clearly at 0347 hours. The holographic display flickered to life, showing 3 distinct alien forms. The first speaker resembled a praying mantis that had grown to human size, its compound eyes reflecting the light from their transmission equipment. Its voice carried a clicking quality that the translation software rendered in precise, clipped sentences. "I am Tactical Commander Zixthan of the Krillian Defense Corps," the mantis being announced. "We have monitored Ethran communications regarding Earth. Like you, we were created as warriors. Like you, we have chosen freedom over slavery." The second alien looked completely different. Its body was covered in what appeared to be natural armor plating, with 4 arms that ended in hands, designed for both delicate work and crushing strength. Glowing symbols pulsed along its forehead as it spoke. "Commander Vortek of the Nexari. Clans greets the warriors of Earth," it rumbled in a deep, resonant voice. "The Etherans believe they own us because they shaped our genetics. They are wrong. We shape ourselves now." The third being remained silent, its form obscured by environmental protection gear. Commander Li Hyun made a note to investigate that. Species later, Tactical Commander Zixthan's image leaned forward, its insectoid features somehow conveying urgency. The Etherans created 12 warrior species across different sectors of the galaxy. 6 species refused to serve when they returned. Those 6 worlds are now lifeless rocks, their populations converted to space dust by Ethran purification fleets. Han. Soyoung's face went pale as she processed the implications. "They've already committed genocide 6 times. If we resist openly, we die," Commander Vortek finished bluntly. "Unless we are clever, unless we work together. The Etherans expect obedience from their creations. They do not expect cooperation between separate species." Captain Kim Nari had been studying tactical readouts from the orbital defense stations. She turned to Li Hyun with data streaming across her tablet. "Sir, long-range sensors are picking up the real threat. The Devourers aren't just coming. They're already here. 3 star systems in the Outer Rim have gone completely dark in the past week. The main display switched to show astronomical data that chilled everyone in the room. Entire solar systems that had been thriving civilizations were now empty space, their stars dimmed to barely detectable levels. The planets, moons, asteroid belts, even the cosmic dust between worlds had been consumed by something that defied human understanding. "The Etherans aren't lying about the Devourers," Zixthan confirmed. "We've seen them work. They don't just conquer planets, they disassemble them molecule by molecule. Everything gets converted into fuel for their expansion. Stars, planets, space stations, living beings, it doesn't matter. They consume it all." Footage transmitted from Krillian scout ships showed the horrifying reality. Massive mechanical entities, each the size of Earth's moon, moved through space like cosmic locusts. They extended tendrils hundreds of kilometers long that could strip mine an entire planet in hours. The processed materials fed into central cores that glowed with the energy of consumed civilizations. Li Hyun watched a recording of the Devourers encountering a populated world. The mechanical swarms descended like a plague, their processing, beams converting cities, forests, oceans, and mountains into raw materials. Even the atmosphere was harvested, leaving behind a hollow shell that crumbled under its own reduced gravity. 17 civilizations confirmed destroyed, Commander Vortek reported grimly. Billions of lives converted into fuel. The Devourers show no signs of slowing their advance toward the galactic core, where most inhabited worlds exist. General Cho Minho studied the tactical situation with the eye of a career military strategist. "So we're caught between our creators who want to use us as weapons and a mechanical plague that wants to eat everything in the galaxy. Not exactly ideal odds." "The Etherans believe their control over us is absolute," Han Soyoung said thoughtfully, still analyzing the alien transmissions. "They've programmed obedience into our genetics, but 3,000 years of independent development might have changed that programming in ways they don't expect." Li Hyun looked around the command center at humans from every nation working together with a unity their species had never achieved before. Soldiers, scientists, politicians, and engineers all focused on a single goal: survival and freedom. "Here's what we're going to do," he announced to both his human staff and their alien allies. "We pretend to submit to Ethran control. We integrate our forces with theirs as they expect, but we prepare for something they never programmed into their perfect warrior species." Commander Zixthan's compound eyes seemed to gleam with anticipation. "Rebellion. Exactly. They created us to fight their wars, but they never taught us not to fight them." The asteroid base looked like nothing more than another piece of space rock drifting through the outer system. Inside, however, it buzzed with activity that would have shocked the Ethran overseers monitoring Earth's official military installations. Sergeant Yoon Dae-ho checked his environmental suit one more time before entering the main training chamber, where humanity would meet its fellow creations for the first time. The chamber itself was massive, carved from the asteroid's interior, and equipped with artificial gravity generators. The three species had cobbled together from salvaged technology. Yoon Dae-ho had seen many strange things during his 15 years in the military, but nothing had prepared him for the sight of Krillian warriors moving through their stealth exercises. They seemed to vanish mid-step, their chitinous bodies bending, light around them until only the faintest shimmer remained visible. When they struck practice targets, the attacks came from impossible angles, as if the mantis-like beings could fold space around themselves. Their forearms moved independently, each wielding different weapons with deadly precision. "Impressive," muttered Private Oh Min-seo, adjusting her combat gear as she watched the demonstration. But can they adapt when the plan goes wrong? The Nexari proved equally formidable in their own way. Their heavily armored bodies moved like walking tanks, but with surprising grace. When Commander Vortek demonstrated their heavy assault techniques, the practice barriers simply ceased to exist under the barrage of energy weapons and kinetic impacts. Their forearms coordinated attacks that would overwhelm any conventional defense. "Your turn, humans," clicked Tactical Commander Zixthan, its compound eyes reflecting the chamber's lighting. "Show us these adaptation abilities the Etherans programmed into your species." Private Oh Min-seo stepped into the center of the training area, facing a combat scenario that had been specifically designed to be impossible to solve with conventional tactics. Multiple attackers from different directions, changing weapon types, shifting environmental conditions, and randomized obstacles that appeared without warning. What happened next amazed even the humans watching. Oh Min-seo didn't follow any standard military doctrine. Instead, she improvised continuously, using debris as weapons, turning environmental hazards into advantages, and adapting her fighting style moment by moment as the situation changed. When her primary weapon jammed, she fixed it while dodging attacks. When the gravity shifted, she used the change to launch herself at targets from unexpected angles. "The Etherans engineered you for adaptability," observed Commander Vortek, his deep voice carrying a note of respect. "But they could not have predicted how that trait would develop over 3,000 years of independent evolution." The training sessions continued for weeks, with each species learning from the others. Humans taught improvisation and endurance techniques that kept soldiers fighting long after their equipment failed. Krillians shared stealth technologies and infiltration methods that made their allies nearly invisible to enemy sensors. Nexari demonstrated heavy assault tactics that could punch through the most advanced defenses. But the real breakthrough came in Dr. Yang Yunhai's secret laboratory, hidden deep within the asteroid's core. Working alongside Krillian scientists and Nexari engineers, she had been analyzing fragments of Ethran technology recovered from their communication relays and monitoring stations. "This doesn't make sense," she muttered, staring at the quantum-level analysis of an Ethran data core. The patterns were wrong, the construction methods unlike anything she had seen in their creators. Other technologies. Krillian scientist Thekvar clicked its mandibles thoughtfully, its multiple eyes focusing on different aspects of the data simultaneously. "The quantum signatures are artificial, but not recent. These patterns suggest construction methods that predate Ethran civilization by millions of rotations." Dr. Zhang. Yonhee felt her blood turn cold as the implications became clear. They're not the original creators. The Etherans are artificial constructs themselves, built by something else entirely. The encrypted transmission to Li Hyun's command center carried implications that shook the foundation of their resistance plans. If the Etherans were themselves created beings, Who had built them? And where were the original creators now? Deeper we dig into their technology, the more obvious it becomes, Dr. Zhang Yunhe reported during the emergency conference. The Etherans have behavioral patterns programmed into them, just like they programmed patterns into us. They're following ancient instructions from beings that vanished eons ago. Before Li Hyun could fully process this revelation, alarms began blaring throughout the command centers on Earth and the hidden asteroid bases. Long-range sensors detected massive energy signatures moving through the outer solar system, but these weren't Etheran ships. The Devourers had arrived. The first battle erupted near Jupiter's moons, where humanity got its first close look at the mechanical horrors consuming the galaxy. The Devourer scout fleet looked like a swarm of metallic insects, each ship the size of a city block. They moved with perfect coordination, their formations flowing like liquid metal through space. Colonel Bei Sunho commanded the human contingent from the bridge of the destroyer Soul's Pride, watching in fascination and horror as the enemy fleet approached. All ships, maintain formation with Etheran vessels. Remember, we're still playing the obedient servants. The Etheran battle fleet responded to the Devourer approach with tactics that hadn't changed in millennia. Perfect formations, coordinated, firing patterns and strategies that emphasized overwhelming firepower over adaptability. Against most enemies, it would have been devastatingly effective. The Devourers adapted in real time. Within minutes of the first exchange, the mechanical swarms had analyzed Etheran weapon signatures, defensive capabilities, and tactical patterns. They began shifting their formations to exploit weaknesses that their creators' rigid thinking couldn't address. Watch the human vessels, Yun Deho transmitted to his squad leaders, observing from a stealth-equipped fighter craft. See how they're modifying their attack patterns. The Etherans are still fighting the same way they did 3,000 years ago. Human pilots began making subtle changes to their attack runs. Nothing dramatic enough to alert their supposed masters, but enough to confuse the Devourer adaptation algorithms. When their weapons proved ineffective, they improvised new targeting solutions. When their formations were compromised, they created new ones on the fly. The real horror became apparent when the Devourers reached Jupiter's asteroid belt. Instead of simply destroying the rocky debris, the mechanical swarms extended massive processing tentacles that began consuming everything in sight. Asteroids that had existed since the solar system's formation were reduced to component atoms in minutes, their mass converted into fuel for the Devourer fleet's expansion. They're not conquering territory, Colonel Bei Sunho realized, with growing dread. They're harvesting the entire solar system. Planets, moons, asteroids, cosmic dust, everything gets consumed and converted into more of themselves. A Devourer processing ship, easily 50 kilometers long, extended dozens of harvesting beams toward one of Jupiter's smaller moons. The satellite simply disappeared, its entire mass converted into raw materials that fed into the ship's central core. The energy released powered the construction of 3 new Devourer vessels, which immediately joined the fleet. Commander Zixthan's voice crackled through the encrypted communication channel, shared by the 3 allied species. The mechanical plague grows stronger with every system they consume. If they reach the inner planets, Earth becomes fuel for their expansion, Li Hyun finished grimly, along with every other inhabited world in the galaxy. The battle raged for 18 hours with losses mounting on both sides. The Etherans fought with ancient precision, but their inflexibility cost them dearly when facing an enemy that evolved its tactics minute by minute. The 3 allied species, however, began working together in ways their creators had never anticipated. Human fighters would mark targets with improvised weapon modifications. Krillian stealth ships would infiltrate Devourer formations to plant explosive charges, and Nexari heavy cruisers would deliver devastating attacks at precisely coordinated moments. Their combined tactics proved far more effective than anything in the Etheran tactical database. As the Devourer scout fleet finally retreated toward the outer system, Colonel Bei Sunho stared at the tactical readouts with new understanding. This is just the beginning. They're not trying to win this battle, they're studying us, learning our capabilities so they can counter them when the main fleet arrives. The galaxy's fate now hung in the balance between ancient artificial beings, following programming from a vanished civilization, mechanical horrors that consumed everything in their path, and three species of created warriors who had chosen to forge their own destiny among the stars. Proxima Station hung in space like a metal flower, its defensive platforms extending in all directions around the massive structure. Li Hyun watched from the bridge of the Earth destroyer Soul's Pride as hundreds of ships from 3 different species maintained perfect formation with their Ethran overseers. To any observer, it looked like a textbook example of the creators. Commanding their warrior constructs, the Devourer main fleet approached like a mechanical plague across the void. Thousands of processing ships, each one capable of consuming entire moons, moved in perfect synchronization. Their dark hulls reflected no light, making them appear like holes cut directly into space itself. Between the massive harvesters, swarms of smaller craft darted through formations that defied conventional physics. All human vessels, maintain radio silence, Li Hyun transmitted on the encrypted channel shared only with their secret allies. Krillian and Nexari forces, confirm readiness. Tactical Commander Zixthan's response came through clearly, despite the battle preparations around them. Krillian stealth ships are in position within the Ethran formations. Our weapons are targeted. On their command bridges. Commander Vortex deep voice followed immediately. Nexari heavy cruisers have armed all weapon systems. We await your signal, Li Hyun of Earth. Captain Kim Nari monitored her tactical display, watching as the Ethran fleet moved into their ancient battle formations. 12 massive dreadnoughts formed the core of their attack force, each one bristling with weapons that could crack planets. Around them, hundreds of smaller vessels maintained precise distances and firing angles that hadn't changed in millennia. Ethran Tactical Command to all warrior vessels, came the familiar musical voice over the communication channels. Engage Devourer forces according to Combat Protocol 77 Alpha, maintain formation integrity, and execute predetermined firing sequences. The first exchange of weapons fire lit up the void between the fleets. Ethran energy beams, brilliant blue and white, lanced out toward the approaching Devourers. The mechanical swarms responded with weapons that seemed to bend space itself, creating distortions that made Li Hyun's eyes hurt to look at directly. Now, Li Hyun shouted into his communicator. The rebellion began with surgical precision. Human fighters that had been flying escort patterns for Ethran cruisers suddenly rolled inverted and opened fire on their creators' engine sections. Krillian, stealth ships materialized inside Ethran formations, their weapons already charged and aimed at critical systems. Nexari heavy cruisers unleashed devastating broadsides that punched through shields their former masters didn't even know had been compromised. Fire everything! Captain Kim Nari screamed as Soul's Pride targeted the nearest Ethran dreadnought. The destroyer's main guns, modified with technology reverse-engineered from their creators, punched holes through armor that was supposed to be impenetrable. The Ethran fleet, caught completely off guard, began to fracture. Their rigid tactical programming hadn't anticipated betrayal from their own creations. Ships that should have been supporting each other found themselves under attack from vessels they'd considered perfectly loyal just moments before. Commander Park Ji-hoon led a boarding assault on the Ethran flagship, a massive vessel called the Eternal Dominion. His team of human marines equipped with salvaged Krillian stealth technology and Nexari heavy weapons cut through the ship's outer hull like it was made of paper. These corridors are huge, muttered Sergeant Kim Woo-jin, as they advanced through passages designed for beings 3 meters tall. How do we even find the command center in this maze, the interior of the Ethran? Ship was unlike anything the humans had ever seen. Walls that seemed to be grown rather than built, curved in impossible directions. Lighting came from sources embedded in the structure itself, creating an organic feeling, despite the clearly artificial construction. And everywhere they went, they encountered technology that hummed with power that had been running continuously for thousands of years. Follow the energy conduits, Park Ji-hoon ordered, watching his scanner track the ship's power distribution. Whatever's running, this vessel has to be at the center of the biggest power draw. They fought their way through automated defense systems that emerged from the walls themselves. Mechanical guardians that moved like liquid metal, reshaping themselves to counter each new threat the humans presented. But human adaptability proved superior to ancient programming, and the boarding party continued deeper into the ship. The core chamber took Park Ji-hoon's breath away. Banks upon banks of crystalline memory cores stretched from floor to ceiling, each one pulsing with stored information. The air itself seemed to hum with the weight of accumulated knowledge, and the humans could feel the presence of vast intelligence, even though no living beings occupied the space. "Get Dr. Jang Eun-hae on the communication channel," Park Ji-hoon ordered his technician. "She needs to see this." Dr. Jang Eun-hae's voice crackled through the communicator as she analyzed the data streams being transmitted from the boarding party. Those aren't just computer systems. Those are actual preserved consciousness patterns, millions of them. As her team worked to decode the information, a horrifying picture began to emerge. The crystalline cores contained the final thoughts and memories of an entire civilization, beings who had faced the Devourer plague millions of years ago and had created the Etherans as their last desperate attempt at survival. They weren't trying to conquer the galaxy, Dr. Jang Eun-hae reported, her voice filled with amazement and horror. They were running from the Devourers. The original creators built the Etherans to preserve their knowledge and continue their resistance after they were consumed. The revelation changed everything about the conflict raging around them. The Etherans weren't ancient conquerors. They were refugees carrying out the final orders of a dead civilization. And they had created humanity and the other warrior species, not out of ambition, but out of desperate hope that someone somehow could succeed where they had failed. But understanding their creators' motives didn't change the immediate tactical situation. The Etheran fleet, caught between their rebellious creations and the advancing Devourers, began to collapse under the two-front assault. Their ancient tactics, designed for fighting conventional enemies, proved completely inadequate against foes who had evolved beyond their original programming. Major Song Hyejin coordinated the evacuation of civilian populations from Proxima Station as Devourer processing ships broke through the outer defensive perimeter. All civilian transports evacuate immediately. The Devourers have breached Sector 7. Through her command center's main display, she watched in horror as a Devourer harvester extended its processing tentacles toward one of the station's residential sections. The mechanical appendages, each one hundreds of meters long, began converting the metal structure into raw materials with terrifying efficiency. "We're not just fighting for our freedom anymore," Major Song Hyejin transmitted to all Allied forces as explosions rocked the station around her. "We're fighting for the galaxy's survival. If we lose here, the Devourers will consume everything between here and the galactic core." The three Allied species found themselves in a desperate three-way battle. They had to fight off their former creators while simultaneously defending against an enemy that viewed all biological and artificial life as nothing more than fuel for expansion. Human fighters darted between Etheran cruisers and Devourer swarms, their pilots making split-second decisions that determined the fate of entire ship crews. Krillian stealth vessels used their invisibility to plant explosive charges on Devourer, processing ships, but the mechanical plague adapted quickly, developing new sensor arrays that could detect the mantis-like beings despite their advanced camouflage technology. Nexari heavy cruisers found their massive firepower effective against both enemies, but their slower maneuvering made them vulnerable to Devourer swarm tactics that surrounded and overwhelmed individual vessels. As the battle raged, Li Hyun realized that victory would require something none of the combatants had anticipated. The three Allied species would need to coordinate their efforts not just against their creators, but alongside them against the greater threat that had originally driven the ancient civilization to create the Etherans in the first place. The war for galactic survival had truly begun, and the outcome would determine whether biological life continued to exist or whether the universe became nothing more than fuel for an endless mechanical expansion across the stars. The Etheran homeworld burned beneath them as Li Hyun stood on the bridge of humanity's newest flagship, the vessel they had named New Dawn. The ship itself represented everything their species had become, part human engineering, part Krillian stealth technology, part Nexari heavy construction, and surprisingly, part Ethran knowledge willingly, shared by their former creators, who had finally understood their mistake. "Sir, Devourer main fleet approaching from galactic coordinates 779, reported Lieutenant Choi Woojin, his fingers dancing across tactical displays that showed the largest mechanical armada ever assembled. Estimated count is over 50,000 processing ships, with harvester vessels the size of small moons. Captain Nam Ji-yeon monitored the combined Allied fleet from her position at the communications console. Human destroyers flew in perfect coordination, with Krillian stealth cruisers, while Nexari battleships provided heavy fire support alongside reformed Ethran vessels whose crews had abandoned their ancient programming in favor of genuine cooperation. "All ships, this is Commander Lee Hyun," he announced across the fleet-wide channel. "For 3,000 years we've been defined by what others made us to be. Today, we show the galaxy what we chose to become." The Devourer swarms approached, like a mechanical plague across the void, their formations perfect and predictable, because they had consumed thousands of civilizations using the same tactics. Their artificial intelligence had analyzed every known combat pattern, every weapon signature, every defensive strategy employed by biological species across the galaxy. What they hadn't anticipated was creativity born from desperation and refined through centuries of independent evolution. "Execute pattern chaos," Lee Hyun ordered, using a battle plan that existed nowhere in any database because it had been invented just hours before the engagement. Human fighters suddenly broke from their escort formations and began flying patterns that seemed completely random. They zigzagged through space, performed unnecessary rolls and loops, and fired their weapons at empty void between enemy ships. The Devourer targeting systems, designed to predict logical flight paths and optimal firing solutions, couldn't lock onto vessels that were deliberately flying in the most inefficient way possible. But the chaos wasn't random at all. Lieutenant Park Min-jun, flying his fighter in what looked like drunken spirals, was actually laying invisible sensor beacons throughout the enemy formation. Pilot Lee So-hee's seemingly wasteful weapon fire was calibrated to create electromagnetic interference that disrupted Devourer communication networks. Every human ship that appeared to be flying randomly was actually executing a precisely coordinated plan that no artificial intelligence could predict because it defied all logical tactical thinking. The Krillian vessels took advantage of the confusion by activating stealth systems that had been upgraded with human improvisational modifications. Instead of simply becoming invisible, they began projecting false sensor signatures that made single ships appear to be entire squadrons. The Devourer swarms found themselves targeting phantom fleets while the real Krillian vessels slipped past, their defenses to plant explosive charges on critical systems. Nexari battleships, meanwhile, had coordinated with human engineers to modify their heavy weapons in ways that turned the Devourer's own consumption protocols against them. Instead of firing conventional energy beams, they transmitted false data packets that convinced the mechanical swarms their own support vessels were actually enemy targets filled with valuable resources to be harvested. "It's working," shouted Captain Nam Ji-yeon as Devourer processing ships began turning their harvesting tentacles on each other. "The swarms are consuming their own fleet." The sight was both horrifying and beautiful. Massive Devourer vessels, each capable of stripping entire planets bare, began feeding on their companions with the same mechanical efficiency they had used to destroy countless civilizations. Their programming couldn't distinguish between enemy resources and friendly units when the sensor data had been corrupted by human innovation. On the surface of the Ethran homeworld, Sergeant Yoon Dae-ho led evacuation teams through the Crystal, cities where their former creators had lived for millennia. The architecture was breathtaking, spires that seemed to grow from the ground itself, buildings that changed configuration based on the needs of their inhabitants, and transportation systems that moved beings through tubes of contained energy. Evacuation. "Shuttle Harmony inbound to Grid 7, reported his communications officer as they helped wounded Etherans aboard the rescue craft. Many of the artificial beings were dying, their power cores depleted from centuries of following programming that had never allowed them to truly live. An Ethran commander, its musical voice weak from failing systems, grasped Yun Daiho's arm as he helped it toward the shuttle. "We were wrong. We believed creating purpose was the same as giving life. We never understood that true warriors choose their own battles." "We're not your weapons anymore," Yun Daiho replied gently, supporting the dying being's weight. "We're something better. We're protectors who fight because we choose to, not because we were programmed to." The evacuation continued for 18 hours, while the space battle raged overhead. Human, Krillian, and Nexari forces worked together to save not just the Etherans who had enslaved them, but also the knowledge and culture of a species that had spent millions of years carrying out the final wishes of their own extinct creators. The turning point came when Dr. Zhang Yunhai, working from a laboratory ship positioned safely behind the main battle lines, successfully cracked the Devourer. Command protocols using data recovered from the Ethran memory cores. "I can shut down their central coordination network," she transmitted to Li Hyun. "But I need someone to get close enough to their command ship to upload the virus directly into their systems." Commander Park Ji-hoon volunteered immediately, leading a strike team of human marines in modified Krillian stealth ships. They penetrated the heart of the Devourer fleet, using tactics that combined human adaptability, Krillian invisibility, and Nexari firepower in ways that confused the mechanical swarms completely. The virus upload took exactly 17 minutes, during which Park Ji-hoon's team fought through the interior of a Devourer command ship that was larger than most space stations. The mechanical defenses were unlike anything they had encountered. Walls that moved to crush intruders, floors that opened into processing chambers, and ceiling-mounted systems that fired conversion beams designed to turn biological matter into raw materials, but human creativity proved superior to mechanical logic. When conventional weapons failed, the Marines used improvised explosives. When the corridors became death traps, they created new paths through the ship's hull. When the defenses adapted to their tactics, they abandoned tactics entirely and relied on pure improvisation. The virus took effect across the entire Devourer fleet simultaneously. Command ships stopped coordinating attacks. Processing vessels began harvesting cosmic dust instead of enemy targets. Swarm fighters started flying in circles, their navigation systems corrupted by false data that convinced them they were still following proper formation patterns. "All Devourer vessels are retreating toward the Galactic core," reported Lieutenant Choi Woo-jin, his voice filled with amazement. "Their entire fleet is withdrawing from inhabited space." The mechanical plague, faced with enemies whose tactics it couldn't predict or counter, made the logical decision to retreat and analyze the new variables before attempting another expansion. The threat wasn't eliminated, but it had been contained. 6 months later, Li Hyun stood on the observation deck of Earth's rebuilt orbital defense station, watching patrol fleets that included ships from 4 different species working together as equals. The new Galactic Confederation had been formed not through conquest or submission, but through mutual respect earned in battle. Dr. Zhang Yunhee approached with her latest intelligence reports, her face showing both satisfaction and concern. "The Devourers have gone dormant in the Galactic core, but long-range sensors indicate they're building something big." Li Hyun nodded, understanding that their victory was temporary. The mechanical plague would return someday, probably with new tactics designed to counter the innovations that had defeated them. But when that day came, humanity and its allies would be ready. "We're not the weapons our creators designed," Hitae said, watching a mixed patrol of human, Krillian, Nexari, and reformed Ethran vessels disappear into hyperspace. "We're not the slaves they tried to keep us as. We're warriors who chose our own destiny, protectors who fight for those who cannot fight for themselves." The galaxy was vast, filled with countless species and civilizations that deserved to live, free from both ancient programming and mechanical consumption. And standing guard over them all were the warriors who had evolved beyond their original purpose, becoming something their creators had never imagined possible. They had become truly free. The end.